Welcome back, Raw Thoughts listeners. I just want to thank you guys so much for listening to another week, another guest, and another episode with me. Some fun stats came out with Spotify, and I just wanted to thank my listeners being in the top 25% in Spotify for shared, and top 10%, or excuse me, top 25% for most followed, and top 10% for the most shared. So with that, I just want to really thank you for being able to share these podcasts with people that you feel like that they are needed to be heard, and with the guests that come on. On Raw Thoughts podcast, I just bring individuals on and we talk about life. So whether that be, where they've gone, where they're going, or where they are right now. So right now, I want to introduce Coach Juss. He is, if you guys have been following along with the podcast, one of the Columbia High School football coaches. So welcome on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I got to work with you a little bit while we were doing the fundraising for the Columbia High School football team.
Yep.
And what is coaching like? What do you do in the coaching room?
Okay. That's a lot. So as a coach, I would say I started coaching at 18. So I've been doing this for a while. I've actually coached high school football for a while. I've coached youth programs for a while. I've kind of done a couple different things. I've kind of tried to do, try to find where I should go. And that kind of led me to, still coaching high school football, still helping out in youth programs where I can, but also starting my own quote unquote team, program, company, however you want to kind of see it. Where now, instead of me just coaching in the high school and coaching the youth, I actually have kids that come to our academy called Rare Academy, and they're from all over Idaho, and I'm able to coach them in what is 7-on-7. So it's almost like flag football, but it's two-hand touch. The guys get, they wear helmets. They still have jerseys. Some of the basic football rules are still there, but it's been something that I've learned that can help with kids' development, really. So I've been coaching the youth, still trying to develop players. I train kids on the outside on the weekends or during the week sometimes, and then I still coach high school football. So I'm really adapted into my Instagram handle, Coach Just. That's really what I do. I've decided that was my path in life and really what I want to do.
How football and why football?
How football and why football? So this is a crazy thing. I always tell people this story. So growing up, I was actually all about basketball, right? So I didn't really play football like that. My dad was a hooper. I was a hooper. So all my friends were hoopers. My best friend, he's 7 foot tall.
Jesus.
Right? So, or 7 feet, I guess I should, but he's we all played basketball. And then I started playing football kind of just for fun, pickup games, playing youth leagues, things like that. And it really wasn't really my thing. I still loved basketball. And then one day I kind of got into high school and I was like, you know what? I'm going to start taking this kind of serious. And then I started playing, loved it. It was a little bit the different atmosphere. The coaches was different. Instead of, basketball in high school, at least you might have 1 or 2 coaches.
Right.
Football, it's like 7 or 8, depending on, what level you're on. But you're able to make a connection with more than just one coach. And I think that's honestly why I loved football. But then when I got into coaching, I thought about, that's honestly why. Because the coaches, the relationships, I always tell people, football really did make a big impact on my life. I originally from Inglewood, California, so it's not always the best neighborhoods to be around or to grow up in, but a lot of us spent our time playing football or playing sports, period. So we weren't able or didn't have a chance to really get in trouble, right? Because we were at practice at 6 a.m. in the weight room, and then you weren't getting home until 6 p.m. And, at that point in high school, all you want to do is eat and go to sleep because you're pretty tired.
You're exhausted.
You're not thinking about homework, not thinking about other things. So it was just, that that's really what got me. So then I realized that there was a lot of kids that really didn't really understand that football does more than what people really think. It's
Right.
not just a sport where you got, kids are going out there hitting each other, catching touchdowns, celebrating, kind of, it changes a lot of kids' lives. And I think a lot of people don't look at the sport that way. They look at it as, just a game, but, a lot of kids, it's their outlet. It's a way for them to have someone to speak with. It's a lot of different things. So I always try to be that coach that can be there for kids, but also, help them develop to whatever goal they're really trying to get to.
Right. So with the Columbia High School, where do you fit in that coaching? Because there's many of you guys. Obviously, I know the head coach. Like, what is your role in that, and what do you do?
Whew, I like to call myself the assistant head coach, but I like to do a lot for Charlie. But I'm actually the defensive coordinator. I also help out with the social media part of it also. And I try to just wherever they can use me, I guess. But yeah, I'm the varsity defensive coordinator, and then I'm in charge of the recruiting and the marketing side of it, or the social media side of it.
Okay. And like what is your coaching style? Because I think all of them have such different, unique, and I think that is what the cool thing about having that many coaches is that there is a lot of different styles. Maybe kids go to you versus going to Charlie or going to any of the other coaches. Like, what is your style of coaching?
My style, I guess, like I'm a player's coach is what I like to tell people. So if anything, I understand kids a little bit more, and it could be because nowadays the kids, I kind of relate to them a little bit more than, some of the 50 plus older coaches right now, because, things have different. The game has changed. So I like to say they can come to me about those things, but I also understand where they're coming from a lot more compared to a lot of the other head coaches and, coaches around. Because I get it. I was that kid. I did a lot of that stuff. But, outside of that, I'm that coach you're going to hear on the sideline. That's why they put me in the box. Because, a lot of the times I tried my best to actually help a player, stay in the game even when they're frustrated, but also expressing my frustrations without taking them out of the game. Because I understand, as a player, sometimes being yelled at helps me, and sometimes it doesn't. You got to really understand the kind of kid that you're coaching. And I really do. I pride myself in doing that job where I really say, hey, that kid can take this and that kid can't take that, right? And I kind of, one kid might get chewed out on the regular, but, they know it's out of love. And I always tell people as a coach, if I'm talking to you all the time, that means I care, right? If you're being coached by me and we barely have had 10 words said to each other, it's not that I don't care, but, I'm going to give you the same effort that you're going to give me, right? So, I always say, like, if you're hearing from me, that means I know you can do better than what you're doing right now. So a lot of the times kids will say, like, coach, you're being negative. I'm like, no, I'm not being negative. I just expect more out of you guys. And that's just how I was. Like, we went to Montana and, we had a great first day and, we got a goal line stop and the kids were all happy about it. I was semi-happy. Then the coaches are like, well, what's wrong? I'm like, yeah, we got the stop, but we didn't do it right. Like, that wasn't how it was supposed to go down. We got lucky, right? Because, we always say, like, football is a game of Jimmys and the Joes. And sometimes you just have the better players, right? So we got lucky. But, me, I want it not to be perfect, but at least done right. So, that's what the kids will always say about me. Like, coach always just wants it done right. Right. And, whether we miss a play or, we do bad or we do right, as long as it's right, I'm okay. I can live with that. I can coach you guys on how to do it better next time compared to me coaching you guys again on where to do it or where to be at, right? Where you guys should have already known. So it's a little bit of a difference my coaching style.
How is it being around all of those high schoolers? Like, I was around them for a glimpse And it's just, I mean, I remember being a high schooler, and I don't remember being that big of a shithead.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. It's crazy. I'll just be honest. Like, there's points where you get to coach and you're like, why am I here? Right? But, you got to always remind yourself, why you're doing what you're doing. Like, what's your why? But yeah, I mean, being around high school football players, the things you hear, the things you see, and I mean, I'll be honest, like, Columbia is different. Okay, like, I always tell people, because I have a lot of coaches at a lot of different schools, and they're at Eagles and they're at Rockies, and they're telling me their stories of what they have going on, and I'm like, bro, don't compare, right? But it's a lot. It's a lot dealing with that many kids, and it's the different personalities, the different egos, the kids that need to be humbled, right? Or the kids that need to really understand that, life is different. And me being that high school football player, I completely understand, like, where they were, where they are, and I've tried to help them now if I can, right, before they get out. Like, hey, when you leave mom and dad's house, it's different. When you don't live, 30 minutes driving distance where you have to get on a flight to go see your family, it's different. And I think players have to really realize that, like, hey, life is going to be different when you guys get outside of these, this football game, or when you leave Columbia. And, it's that speech that I had to give the guys on their last game was, 90% of you guys will never put another helmet on, right? So you guys got to take this stuff, and it's real. And it's a lot of guys don't really understand that part, I guess, until maybe the last game, right? But
Right.
it was different. It was definitely a challenge, I think, this year that I actually enjoyed at the same time, but it's different. And every high school that I've been at, like, I've been coaching football now for 10 years, it has been wild, right? Like, every school I have had a different kid or a different group of kids, and I'm like, all right, these guys are going to be the issues that I'm going to run into. But it's a challenge.
And it also comes down to, I mean, especially over the 10 years, and this isn't to say just specifically Columbia, but every high school has its own, I would say, issues or own, demographic because of where it's located, because of what types of kids are going there, because of what, just simply the demographics are, where it's located. And so I think that does play into a part. But I like what you said about, they may not put a helmet on again, but I can promise you that they will remember the stuff that you say, and it may not come right now, and they may never tell you that.
Right.
But I think you guys as coaches are instilling those morals and life, like, goals to them outside of just football.
Yeah.
And that's cool to see.
It's important. I think that's what people have to realize is, we're also trying to make great young men outside of football. And that's, that kind of goes back to my own company, right? Like, our company is called Rare, but what it is respect, ambition, responsibility, and effort, right? Like, those 4 things will get you far in life outside of this game.
Right.
But I still need those 4 things during this game, right? So it's a little different teachings, but it depends on what the kids are coming from, and, like, especially the Columbia kids, because they've had 3 different head coaches in the last 4 or 5 years, right? So it's a lot of change, trust, things like that. For you got to really get the kids to buy into you. So it's those different processes that I think come into how a football team is in the long run.
Right. And tell us more about Rare. Like, how did that start? Why did you start that?
Yeah. So it kind of goes back to the high school football thing. So I was coaching high school football, and to be honest with you, in Idaho, I was looking, I'm like, not many guys are going to go play football in college. But I took a step back, and I'm like, why? Right? Like, why aren't they going to go play football? And then I started looking more, and I'm like, we're just not developing as fast or as well as surrounding states, like the Washingtons, the Utahs, the Oregons. Those were what Idaho players are always compared to. So I kind of was like, what can I do? So I would say probably my third, fourth year, I was like, I'm going to start a camp series where we're going to start hosting camps in the summertime, have the youth kids come in, the high school kids come in, teach some different drills and let them kind of compete, bring somebody from back home, like in California, that, trains guys, does big things for the football community there, bring them to Idaho, and have them teach the kids. And it was a way for us to do that where instead of, you having to fly to Washington, fly to California, fly to Texas to get this teaching and this learning, bring the coach here, right? I had ex-Super Bowl guys, Jordan Babineau, who played for the Seahawks. He came here. A lot of the NFL guys that came to Boise State were here. I always tell people my first, Brett Rippin, a lot of those guys, JJ, a lot of those guys were, big-time Boise State guys. They were helping out at my camps early. And I was really trying to push a way for these high school kids to really get better. And then after that, we went into training. So I started training a little bit more. I have Shane Williams Rhodes. He's another guy that helps me out. Kyle Cron, Joel Clark, a bunch of different guys that we have. Armand Nance. We started training the kids outside of just doing the camps. So I said, okay, let's train these guys. Shane already kind of had his thing going. And I said, let's kind of pull this together, right? We kind of both have the same mission, but if you can join what I'm doing, right, I think this could be bigger than, what we have going on. And then, it's just a lot of athletes weren't going to play college football. They weren't really getting the development. And, and it's not an ego thing for me, but I always tell people, if you look at the way the Valley has gone since we really started this and pushing, things have happened a lot. Like coaches, players, have gone on to bigger things. And I think that's what our goal was, right? Like, how do we get these players to go play at the next level or reach their goals? What's the easiest way, right? Exposure. Exposure is the biggest way to kind of get these kids out. And I thought to myself, hey, let me see what I can do with these guys. How do I get these guys out? How do I get them to go play college football? Outside of just going to College of Idaho or going to, I think, a Rocky Mountain College was another big one. Idaho State, U of I, right? Boise State, Coach Pete was here. He was really grabbing a good amount of guys. I think Avalos is kind of getting back to that and grabbing, those local guys, keeping the soil in the soil. But, I'm like, okay, that's good. But, can we go to Washington, right? Mm-hmm. Can we go to, Florida? Can we go to Michigan, right? Like Colston Loveland, a guy from Gooding, Idaho, right? Caught a touchdown, his first touchdown pass for Michigan this last week over Ohio State. That's big, right? Like nobody would sit back and think like, oh yeah, Jim Harbaugh went all the way to Gooding, Idaho, right, in the middle of nowhere, for being honest.
Yeah.
To recruit a kid, right, and that's Colston putting in the work. Colston and his high school coaches doing everything they have to do to get him to that stage, but he still just needed the exposure. Right, like that's what we do. Like, how do you give the kids the exposure to, get to where they went? We have kids that come into our program that are like, hey, I just want to play college football, and I tell them, hey, if you don't care where you go, we're the place for you. If you're gonna be picky and choosy, I might not be the right place for you. And that's just where we wanted to go, and get kids to play at different levels, right? Like, we have the number one player in Idaho this year is going to the University of Oregon, right, on a full scholarship.
Wow.
4 years ago, you're probably not really saying that, outside of maybe one or two guys, right? Like Tommy, like a couple of those guys that were in the eastern part or Highland, they were kind of pushing those guys out, right? Rocky Mountain here, Eagle, they kind of had a couple of guys that they were pushing out. But it was like one or two a year, right? Since last year, I guess you can say it was our really first big year of really doing it. We're pushing 4, 5, 6, guys out on the irregular. This year, we're probably going to hit over 10 to 15 D1 guys go out this year. And that's including guys like, Kenyon Sadiq who's going to Oregon, or, CJ Jacobson who's going to Utah. And these are all guys that I've connected with when they were sophomores. They were younger guys, and I'm like, hey, the exposure part of what we do at Rare is going to help you guys out a lot. And that kind of helped grow the Idaho area. So then college coaches started contacting us like, hey, just what's going on? Who do we look at? Who are the next players? Who are the big playmakers? And it kind of just helped that out a lot with the kids. And then I'm always like, more, right? Like I can do more. So then we started doing 7-on-7. We partnered with one of the guys, Joe Ozuna. He had a 7-on-7 team going. And now we're 10 teams deep in the 7-on-7 world.
Wow.
Of helping kids from the ages of 9 all the way to 18. We're traveling outside of Idaho, going to go play against different talent, competing against different people, putting them in front of college coaches. We go on college visits, putting them in front of different media outlets. We go to different media outlets, and what that does is it just helps these kids get the exposure that they need, but then it also makes these other colleges intrigued on what's going on in Idaho.
Yeah. It almost makes them look at you and say, all right, what's happening? I want to be a piece of this. I want to be the know of this. How have you developed all of these connections with these coaches? Is it just through the years? Like that? I mean, those are some big names, and trust me, I do not know football names, but I'll watch it, I'll play it. But to remember football names, no, that is not my thing. But how have you made those connections through the years?
Like past life not past life, but like past times when I was in high school, coaches that I've known from, when I was in high school, going through some of these processes that these kids are going through, or coaches that have reached out to me from other people that have heard about what we're doing. Honestly, Twitter's the biggest way. Honestly, I always tell the kids, Twitter for football is LinkedIn for the professional world.
Wow.
Kind of think of it that way. So I connect with a bunch of coaches on there, right? Like there'll be a random situation where it's offensive coordinator from this school has followed you, right? And I always reach out to them, say, hey, thank you for, following me. And then, hey, here's my phone number. Give me a call when you're available, right? And then boom, next thing you know, they're like, hey, bring your kids. We want to see all the guys you got. Bring them over. And so it's been pretty cool just connecting with them through either social media, word of mouth, other players, other high school coaches. It's just, if people right now, and I'm hoping, I just want to be the spark plug to this, but right now, if a coach is looking for somebody in Idaho, a lot of them are coming to us. And, so other coaches are like, who do I need to go talk to? Where do I need to go? Right? They either hit me up on Twitter or Rare Academy Idaho on Twitter and just kind of, reach out to us that way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's cool to see, Idaho start making some grounds in that, because you do hear Washington, Oregon, even Montana, those, obviously BSU because the blue really,
right.
But it's cool to see that is growing within our community, because that also comes down to, if we're getting those kids into playing football and making them good men at the age of 9, like you're putting good men back into our communities.
Right.
And that is cool to watch and to see, because, there are a lot of just skills that are learned on being on a team.
Right.
There is so much respect. There is, the authority figure that you do have to listen to your coach and not say, not tell him to go screw off or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's that trust. There is that boundary. There is that development within it. That's cool that you are doing that and really kind of pushing that growth within that aspect.
Yeah, it's fun. I enjoy it a lot. Like, I think, like, people always ask me, like, yeah, I won't lie, I am so busy. Like, there's times, like, if you just walk into my office at my house, you're like, whoa, like, what does your brain look like? And I say, it looks like this. Like, essentially, like, this is these whiteboards in my brain. But yeah, it's honestly, it's fun. I enjoy it so much, especially, helping these kids get to what they want to get to, and reaching those goals. Because a lot of them, I start them early, like, especially like last year when we first did the 7-on-7, like, a lot of the parents were reaching out to me like, hey, what time does he need to be at practice? What time does he need to be here? How does he need to get here? And my response was always, he knows. He knows. I told him if he needs to learn that if he wants to do something, he has to communicate, right? Like mom and dad aren't always going to be around, so they'll say, "Hey, what time is practice?" And I would say like, "Hey, I apologize, out of respect, guys. These kids have to grow up." Right? Like at the end of the day, we can't baby them for so long, especially if sports, and that's any sport, is their long-term play, right? Not everybody's going to be able to stay and play at Boise State and drive to Meridian and see mom and dad when they want, right? Some of these kids are going to go far, right? But I think a lot of them really have to understand that, and I think our program also helped the parents let go a little bit, right? Like, it's okay. I completely get it. It's your baby. I get it. But I want to make this easier for you also as a parent, where you're not always worried about, if he ate today, if he knew where his classes were, because he has to know that.
Right.
Because if he goes play to college football, that coach is not going to baby him. And if he messes up, that's the difference between him being on the team or being off the team.
Right.
Quick. So a lot of parents are starting to realize that. And, I'm going to do that with, 11, 12-year-olds this year, the team that I coach, and I'm going to tell them, like, hey, you guys need to communicate with mom and dad. If you know you need a ride somewhere, who's going to take you, then that should be the first person you tell. As soon as I tell you, hey, we have practice tomorrow at 11 o'clock, the first person you should tell is your mom or dad, the person that's taking you. If you wait until the last minute to tell them, that means you didn't really care that you had practice.
Right.
Right? So I always tell the kids, like, communicate, because you're responsible for what you do.
Right. Which can be hard. I mean, because I don't have kids, but I remember telling my mom, I played competitive softball, and I remember telling my mom, like, hey, I've got practice at this time. And she's like, oh yeah, okay. And then like, she's like, oh shit, I forgot you had practice. I'm like, yeah, I do have practice. Like, you're my ride.
Right. Yeah.
But it's that responsibility, and I think so much of just our society has gone away from putting that responsibility back into the kids. It's like, they're their own human. They can make their own choices, good or bad. They can make their own choices, and they have their own consequences.
Right.
Let them have their consequences.
Right.
And like I said, I don't have kids. I've grown up with enough nieces and nephews and sisters older than me, and consequences are the quickest and easiest way to teach someone.
Same. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't have kids, and I have 5 older sisters, and they all have kids, and same deal. But I always, since coaching, I'm like, I don't have kids, but I have my little bros that I really need to make sure they understand, like consequences are going to happen, right? Like if you're late to practice, don't come to me asking why you're not starting. You know why you're not starting, right? Or, when kids aren't doing their jobs, on the field, right? And first thing you're going to hear from me is, hey, pull them. Right? And then they'll come to me and they'll say, did I do something wrong? I said, I didn't pull you off for no reason, bud. Right? Like, let's address it, get it fixed, and you're good to go back in. Right? But I think a lot of the kids that I've noticed where, sometimes they don't get the consequences. And, like parenting, where I am right now, I don't have any kids, so I admire everybody that's a parent currently, because it's a lot of work. Like I have friends who have kids, and they bring their kids over, and they're like, you and me and their kids might go back and forth all the time. And I'm like, yeah, well, sometimes I gotta get them right. But it's just that situation where kids sometimes listen to somebody outside of mom and dad a lot more than they'll listen to mom and dad. Or sometimes it takes me to say what mom and dad is already saying for them to actually hear it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I'm like, whatever I can do on my part, I'm going to do my best, right? So when they go out, especially in the college world, if you think about it, if a coach comes to me and says, hey, we want that kid, I take, that kid goes there. Let's say he, signs a scholarship there. He gets in trouble, right? The coach is going to tell me, right? Or the next time I go to that coach and be like, hey, I got another kid for you, he'll be like, well, remember such and such, he got here, he got in trouble, and I always try to help these kids out, because outside of them representing themselves, representing Idaho, representing Rare, they're representing their family as well. And I think there's a lot of programs, even outside of ours, there's, Triple Threat Academy, who does their thing with Steve. There's, Biggs has his with Gas. There's a bunch of different ways. Taylor off the field, he does his, way of helping the kids out. Like we're all of us kind of have the same mission with what we want to do. We just all do it in different ways.
Right.
And I think as long as us coaches and program directors are doing, what's best for the kids and what's also best for the community, I think we'll do fine. But it's, making sure we all understand that, we can compete with each other, but we all also have the same mission.
Right. Is that hard competing with other coaches and knowing a lot of the other coaches? Like what's that dynamic?
Honestly, that's a good question. It is. It's different, right? Like people will say that. Like me, I'm gonna you're gonna hear it from me. Period. If we're friends or not, right? In the high school world, yeah. Like there's times where I'm like, those are my friends on the other sideline, right? Half those kids on the other team I train or I know,
Right.
and so it's a big situation where I'm like, interesting, right? Like this is going to be a, different dynamic, me rooting against some of my friends. So that is kind of weird sometimes because at that point I'm like, well, you got to lock in. You got to turn a different switch and then know how to turn it back on after the game. But it is different when the football, like when the pads rolls on Friday nights, because win or loss, right? We're talking after the game. We're giving each other hugs, that kind of deal. But, between whistles or between the first quarter and that last quarter, he's an enemy. Right. At the end of the day, like, as the kids say, he's an op, he's going to get the best of me no matter what. And that goes for the 7-on-7 world for me too, right? Like there's kids on other teams that I'll play against that, after the game or during the game as well. Like, I have nothing but love for the kid, right? But I have to beat you. Just right now, I have to beat you, period. And, a lot of those teams, like, there was a big one last year. There's a guy that he was always talking about us. Like, he had every single word he wanted to say bad about, you guys are this, that. And I was like, okay, that's fine. We'll play you guys. And when you play us, just know we're going to act out, right? So they go by gas, and they have this little gas tank that they walk around with. So after we beat him, I took the gas tank, right? And he was a little butthurt about it, but I'm like, this is what happens, right? But, at the end of the day, we're boys. Like he details my car. Like he's a really good guy. We hang out, we talk. Anytime we see each other, it's always good times, right? But that's just how it is. There's another program as well where, they had a lot of kids that we trained, and a lot of kids that, played with us on different tournaments, right? And, the kids over there, love the kids. But, if we play them, I got to beat you guys. Sorry, right. But, and that's just what it is. But, outside of that, I think that's the competitive part of me that I think the world needs, to be honest with you. Like, sometimes I just think, we're soft in some areas where I think if we really just understood that if you compete in everything, and it's not just like, it could be normal things, right? Like just competing in, I tell people all the time, I tell my kids all the time, like, hey, compete who puts their pads on faster, right? Like compete on who gets lined up quicker, right? Compete in the school, classroom, like who learns this, like who knows this more than the other, right? Like I just think there's a lot of things that we can compete in that would help us not be as soft as a community. And, and I understand being soft isn't, not saying it's a bad thing, but there's some things that it can help, right? Like I always tell people, I don't drive defensively. I drive offensively because that's how I avoid the other crazy drivers or the other drivers out here that might hit me, right? So people are like, oh, you got out of that. It's like, yeah, because if I drive timid and if I drive scared and something out there, somebody else is driving scared and timid, right? Like that's what happens. You don't, a lot of those kind of things happen. So I always say, I'd rather be 2 fast trains and 1 fast train and 1 slow train. Because if I'm the slow train and he's the fast train, I'm going to get all of it, right? So it's a way to just really understand, like, hey, sometimes we just got to really understand competing in life goes far. And that's why I think football really helps a lot of kids in this area for sure.
Yeah. And I think it, coming to that fact of competing, is also when you compete, you're going to fail, and it's okay to fail.
Yep.
Because if you're failing, you're trying. And
Yep.
if you're not failing, then it's too easy.
Right.
And I think we just have so much other stuff in the world that's way too easy. Like,
Right.
we don't have to fight for anything. Like,
Correct.
we have running water, and
Right.
we have, the majority of people have houses, that they live in, and we have accessibility to places. Like, we are not in the years where we had to forage for our food. Like,
Right.
it is so easily and accessible to us. We have gotten soft. We have gotten lazy. It's like, fight a little bit, like, find what you want to fight in and go for it.
It's almost an entitlement thing almost, like we expect it, right? Like,
Yeah.
not like we expect to, have a car. We expect to have a house. We expect, even in the football world, they expect to play, right? Like, my mom or my dad donates, this much to the football team. Okay, we appreciate it, but you still got to do A, B, and C, and D to get on the football field.
Right.
Period. And I just think that's where I'm, like, those are the kind of things that I wish I can kind of stop in certain areas or, programs or however it is. But, like, I don't care if your mom donates, $10,000 to Rare. Hey, bud, if you're not it, you're not it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just how it is, right? Like, we're going to take, the best of the best. And if you're not there yet, compete, right? Like, every day compete. And I just think at some point in everyone's life, you have an opportunity to compete at something. But it's up to you on how you accept the challenge, right? Like, are you going to say, well, okay, next time, maybe another time I'll think about it, or are you going to compete? If you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. But, you win. I mean, if you lose, you can try another day, right? But I just think every point in somebody's life, you have an opportunity to compete during that day.
Right.
But it's all about how you use your 24 hours. And that's why I think football is big for youth now.
Yeah. And I think it also comes back to those parents where it's like, money's not going to buy your kid the time on the field, or, like, it really comes back to that practice too, and the repetitiveness. And how do you get better? Well, you put more time into it, not maybe necessarily money and coaching and more, development things. But at the same time, it has to come down to your kids to wanting that.
Right. They got to want it.
They have to want it, or there's nothing.
Right. And I mean, there are situations where I tell people all the time, like, yeah, that mom or that dad wants it more than their kid, right? Like, they want it more than their kid. Or, I have some parents who are spending over $500 plus on their kids for training a month, right? Sometimes, in 2 weeks, they're spending $500 in training. And I tell people all the time, like, hey, if you want to get better at your craft, you have to train outside of when you're supposed to. So I get guys that train with me, right? And money, obviously we charge for it, but I've never turned a kid away because they couldn't afford it, right? Hey, if you're coming to me saying, hey, I want to train, this is all I can afford, I want to go, let's go, right? Like, I get it. You're doing what you got to do. Like, I came from a single parent home for a bit, and then I got a stepdad, but, I understand. My mom was working 2 jobs. She was grinding it out. She did what she had to do for me to get to where I wanted to get to. Right. So now in my head, I'm like, I get it. It makes sense. That's why, like, a lot of the single moms that come to our program, I take care of them. I'm always like, because I get it. I see what it's like. But at the end of the day, as much as I want to help you, let's make sure that he's locked into this. Right. Like, I don't want to just say, hey, here we go. I'm going to give you guys a discount or give you guys this. And he's not 100% committed to, becoming better, because it's a grind.
Right.
It's nothing easy, especially, if that's where you want to get to. I hear it from parents all the time, like, hey, my son, he really wants to play sports. He really wants to be the starting quarterback, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, not saying like I'm the only program around, but is he training to be that starting quarterback, outside of his coaches? Because as a high school football coach, I can't teach a kid everything within the amount of time that I'm slotted during a football season, right? So what are you doing January through August? Like, that's where you get your playing time, to me, right? High practice helps you maintain your playing time, But you earn your playing time January through August, right? But you got to compete. You got to understand you're going to go compete with somebody else. So, that other kid that wants that starting quarterback job, what is he doing, right? Is he outworking you? Because, it's just a part of competing in life. And I think parents always have to understand, it is a lot, right? But we have so many different ways, Idaho Rising Sports, like Rising Stars, Billy, he does a good job of even helping out with finding ways for kids to, purchase cleats or, things that they might need that, not everybody can afford. And there's so many ways, but I always tell the parents, if he wants it, he's going to find it, right? But you can't want it more than your kid. You can't want your kid to be a starting quarterback at the high school so you can be on the sidelines yelling, "That's my baby," and, doing all that business because you want that, right? Because if he doesn't want that, it's not going to happen, right? And if you force it, he's going to resent you. I promise you. And I think that's a learning curve for a lot of parents in the athletic world.
Yeah, I definitely can see that with parents where they want it more than their children. And I think as the child, it's like, I don't even want to do this.
Right.
You're almost making me do this. And then I don't want to try any more harder because I don't care.
Right.
And when you don't care, that's the end of it. Right. Like, you're over. You've lost.
Right. And I mean, there's so many situations. Like we've had a situation where, kids want to play one spot, a parent wants them to play another. And it's like, what are you doing? Right? Like it gets to that point where obviously I'm not a parent, right? So like I said, I haven't experienced that part of it. But outside looking in and being the kid's coach, let the kid have fun.
Right.
Let the kid do exactly what he wants, right? Because you don't want him to look back, in 3-4 years when high school football is over and say, I wish I would have did it this way, right? Like, I wish I would have had this opportunity or that opportunity. Because, I mean, there's some things like me growing up, I used to tell myself, like, man, I wish my mom would just let me do this. Like, but, at that time, my mom, she was, leading me the path that she thought was the right path, right? But some things, especially in the sports world and extra activities, however you want to say it, I think you have to really look at what your kid wants.
Right.
Like, what does your kid want? And what position does your kid want to play? What sport does your kid want to play? Maybe your kid doesn't like football. Maybe football's not him, right? There's kids out there sometimes I'm like, you don't really love this sport, but I can tell, right? But I appreciate you for being here. But I can tell this is a high school thing for you to say, I was on the football team when I was in high school when you get older. But you don't really love this sport. And football, that's a sport that takes a toll on your body, mentally and physically. I tell people all the time, it's a mental game and it's also a physical game. And if you're not in love with that sport, sometimes it's okay to walk away and find something that you're passionate about, right? Like, I knew I was going to be in sports and football some way, somehow. I didn't know if I think at first I wanted to be, when I was like done with football, I was like, you know what, maybe I can go be, represent a football player in the NFL, right? Like, maybe I go to law school so I can do that. Or I thought to myself also, like, maybe I'll, go be a ref or a commentator. There's so many ways. I just knew I was going to be in football some way, but then coaching really brought me back. And then, I look at it as that's what, I knew football was what I wanted. I just didn't know exactly what. And now that as I'm a coach, I can't think of anything else I'd rather do. Like, at this point in my life, like, when I took a year off from coaching and it was miserable. So I think just now at this point in my life, like, I'm a coach. This is what I do. This is how I connect. This is how, I fuel my heart and fuel my soul is through the football field. And I think parents have to learn. And I know some parents might say, well, he's only 14. He doesn't know what he wants. A little bit is right, but also a little bit he does know, right? So I just always tell people, if the kid wants it more than a parent, you can see it, and it's unhealthy. I start to feel bad for the kid. Yeah.
And shit, I'm 30 years old and I still don't know what I want. And my parents would probably say the same thing. Like, are you sure you're making that right decision? I'm like, but I really want to. And they're like, whatever, do it. Like, you kind of have to let them do what they want because that's how you figure it out. And that's how they figure it out. you wouldn't have known that you missed football so much if you hadn't taken that year off. But then you're like, oh, whoa, like, no, actually that needs to be a part of my life. Like, even though it's rough and it's, you know, there is a lot of grind to it, like it's worth it. And that does fuel me. What was your, kind of growing up? Is your family still in California? Are you here by yourself? Like, what does that look like?
So I'm here by myself. My half my family, so we're kind of all over actually. So my mom is originally from South Carolina, so I still have family in South Carolina, but majority is in California. My dad is originally from Chicago, but still has family in California. So like half and half, they kind of migrated. But yeah, majority of my family is in California. 2 of my sisters are in California. One is in Indiana, one is in Chicago, and the other one's in Oklahoma.
Wow.
So
you're kind of spread out everywhere.
And I'm the only boy, so it's a interesting process for me.
How is that with you? I mean, you talked about, you know, the family aspect of these college kids going away and not being around their family. How does that impact you?
Oh, I was ready to go. I was getting out. And don't get me wrong, I love LA. Like being there's just like I loved LA. I love going back to LA, but I was ready to challenge myself somewhere else. And again, love my mom, number one in my life, but I was like, I cannot. I gotta go. You know, I can't live at home. Right, like I have parents that moved back home, like moved back in with friends that moved back in with their parents. And I'm like, no way, there's no way that I could do that. But I wanted to experience something outside of LA, but I also just wanted to experience getting away from home. Like I was just like being the only boy, and really like my sisters kind of went all over. Like one of my sisters went to Florida for school, so like another one went to Howard. So like they went East Coast. You know, I was like, you know what, I gotta get away. Now, did I say when I was in high school I was gonna go to Idaho? Absolutely not. But at that point, I was like, I gotta get out, right? So, it was my way of getting away from home and being able to experience life outside of away from home, and obviously knowing that if I wanted to go back home, I could, but growing up for myself, like that's really what I wanted to do. Like I think a lot of people were just kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna stay in LA, you know, live the LA life, and I'm like, I get it, but it's expensive. And you know, for me, I wanted to see what it was like being on my own and really having to just deal with it, right? So that's kind of what I like. But yeah, I'm out here. I have friends that have become family, extended family, but it's been out here by myself, and it's fun. I have friends that come to Idaho, and they're like, "Oh, I actually like it out here. It's different, you know. It's because it's different from LA.
Yeah,
you know, it's slower. But yeah, I enjoy Idaho a lot. Like especially going to Seattle, and then coming back. You know, I do enjoy Idaho, especially you know the things that you can do out here. I think is what I like.
Right. What was your kind of path on being a football player?
Yeah, so went to high school in California, and then so when I was in high school, there was a lot of smaller schools that I actually was looking at where I was talking to, but nothing you know as big as Boise State at the time. And then a lot of friends, I did have some friends that went on to play at bigger schools, bigger colleges. And I actually had a coach that came to one of our games and was like, hey, saw you, looked, you know, really good, you know, wondering if you'd be interested in a walk-on spot here at Boise State. You know, and I was like, yeah, possibly. You know, I wasn't sure at that point.
Yeah.
Did a visit up here, and at that time, one of the guys that I knew from back home, Titus Young, was on the team, and he kind of showed me around, showed me different things, and I was like, okay, this is, you know, a cool place to be, right? If I do, you know, come up here to try to be a walk-on, and then went through the process, finished the season, and I was like, you know what? A lot of the schools I was looking at, this might sound bad, were all driving distance from my mom to come visit me. So I was like, I want my mom not to get on a plane and she's going to come visit me. Just A, so I know she's coming. B, so she can't just hop in the car and say, I'm coming to see you. And so I was like, cool, I'm going to go, check out Boise State. I knew it was a walk-on opportunity for me. So then, I was like, hey, it can turn into a scholarship if things go down. Came up here, went through a couple different tests. Things that I knew, like injuries and things that happened to me when I was in high school, knew I probably wasn't going to be 100% able to go through with playing college, but I just wanted to see how long. There was a couple things that, especially with my knee, my heart, a couple different things that I had to really go through. But when I got here, I ended up failing my physical twice. And then at that point, I was like, now what? Right? Like, I'm stuck in Idaho, not playing, and really just trying to figure out a way, what I can do outside of that. It's just, I knew football that was my life, right? Like in high school, like that was all we did, honestly. Like all we did in high school was play football. And that was even like a lot of people did track and field. I was a thrower in high school, and because I was like, you know what, I'm not trying to run all the time. And they were just like, you have to do a spring sport when I was in high school. And I was like, you know what, I'll throw. But being a thrower consisted of me just lifting with the football team, right? Just doing our after school workouts. So that's really what we did. That's really what I did, was just focus on football, anything we did. Anytime I hung out with friends, there were only football players. Camps we did all kind of different camps, things like that, just trying to get to our goals. But yeah, that was honestly what I did, and that was me as a football player. That's what I thought was going to be the best way for me. But yeah, high school, college, just really trying to be that player in college. That didn't happen for me, but it was actually still cool because I still was able to bond with a lot of the football guys that were on the team. Lifelong friends like Shane Williams Rhodes, people like that I hang out with right now. Football players that actually got to put on the helmet, that got to do all that, and I didn't get the chance, but I always look at it as I found my calling faster than I needed to. Yeah. Right? Like people always tell me, hey, like you're not playing football, but you're still doing what you want, right? Like I had friends that went to the NFL, and they were sponsored by Adidas as football players, right? And I'm like, geez, that's something that obviously I would want to, but my company's sponsored by Adidas, so I get all the Adidas stuff that I want anyway now, right? So I just kind of learned that, like, that was my path, right? Yeah. Like high school football was, being a player, obviously would have been a lot better for me, what I would wanted to do, but I found my true calling not being a player. Right. I think that's what kind of helped me out.
And I think it's good that you're okay with that, because I think you could have turned it to, if I'm not playing, then I don't like the sport and I'm done.
Right.
But you knew from such a young age, you're like, I'm going to be engulfed in football.
Yeah. I came here at 17. That's why I always tell people, like, I was young for my grade. Like, I graduated high school in 2010, and I should have graduated in 2011, technically, because I'm a November baby. So I got here at 17. So, A, not being able to play football. B, not being able to go to, like, when I was 18 here, everybody was either going to the hookah lounge or going somewhere like that. Couldn't do that. So, my grades that first semester took a shit. Like, it was bad. Like, I just didn't know what to do. Like, it was like, now what? And, that was bad. Living in the athletic dorms at the time made it worse. Right? My roommate being on the football team, rough. The guys who are on the other side of us in Chafee, D-Wing, those are two basketball players, right? Rough. So a lot of it kind of it was a rough time. It was really hard for me to really sit back and be like, now what, right? But, having faith in God, I really made sure that I put myself into the right situation. I was like, what now, right? And I just didn't quit. I got my grades back up. I actually reached out to a friend at the time. Her dad was the head football coach at Timberline. And I was like, yo, if your dad ever needs somebody, tell him I'm free, right? And it so happened that he ended up getting a free open spot. And then he called me and was like, hey, you still interested in coaching? And this was like probably week 3 in their season. And I'm like, yeah. And then
Wow.
he was like, cool, meet me here. We'll be practicing here. Come here. And then I'll get you acquainted with everybody. I went from being a freshman coach for 1 year and then went to being a JV coach for the second year and then varsity since,
Wow.
right? Like he brought me up really quick. And it was one of those deals where, I didn't expect to be on varsity that quick. And then he was like, hey, by the way, you're the new varsity, DB coach. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, deal. And I just, that's kind of what I've done, my entire time is just really grow from that. But yeah, it was like doors started opening once I started trusting, like, hey, this is just part of the process,
Yeah.
right? Like I still love the game, right? Like at a point, like I was, like hated a lot of things, like hated. I was like, my knees, I hate my body. I wish everything was different. I wish my health was different. But at that point, I was like, you know what? I'll be all right. I'll be good. I'll be able to do what I got to do. And then football just kept going, just other different doors, right? Just coaching doors open, camp doors opened. And then now, a business door opened. And now a facility door is opened, right?
Wow.
Like we're going to build a facility. And now, at the end of the day, now I look at it as, that kid that wanted to play sports, that kid that came here to be a Bronco, that didn't happen, now is going to have a building with his logo on it, right? Like just some things that you don't expect, in high school or in college. If somebody would have told me that this was going to happen, I would have been like, no way.
Right.
Right. But now it's opening a lot of doors for me.
Because you don't see a lot of those actual football players have facilities that have their name on it, like you're going to be able to.
Right.
And so even though your plan was to be that player, it sounds like there was a greater plan for you to be right where you needed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like people say, like your story's sometimes already written. You just don't know how it's going.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's it for me. Like I didn't know like where my story was going to go. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but like where I am now, I'm like, this is good. Even though, the snow is already kicking my butt a little bit, I'm good. Like I'm happy. I went from things that, especially like I talked to my mom about, like what she was doing at 30 compared to what I'm doing at 30. And she's like, yeah, like you've so far just killed everything that I've done. Right. And it's just like, well, let's keep it going.
Yeah.
That's just kind of where I'm at right now. Like just kind of keep going.
That's cool. So while we wrap up, how can people, if their players get a hold of you, if they, coaches get a hold of you, how can people get a hold of you for the coaching, for Rare, for anything that you do?
So, social media obviously is the best way. So Coach Just is my Instagram handle, my Twitter handle. I think you can also find me on Facebook that way too. And then Rare Academy Idaho is the name of the business. So if you Google Rare Academy Idaho, it's the first thing that pulls up. We have a website. You can go on Instagram. You can email. We're on all social platforms. And then just I think word of mouth. Honestly, if you ask your friends, hey, where can I get better as a football player on the field? If Rare isn't the first thing that comes out of their mouth, it's the second. I just think where we are right now, that's just where we built it. So I think they can find us on social media. Coach Just, you can DM me. You can find us on Instagram. You can DM Rare Academy Idaho, and I also run both, so I'll talk to you anyway. But this is simple ways to just contact us. And if kids out there do want to get better, have goals that they want to, and parents just need somebody to talk to that can help them out with understanding what's going on. I'm always open to talking to people. I'm probably on the phone, no lie, over 5 hours a day.
Whoa.
Talking Rare business. It's crazy. But again, it's my passion.
Yeah.
And I like to educate parents as much as I can on just what it is that we do, other programs out there that they can go to that we might not have currently, and just, kind of be that one-stop shop for a lot of these people.
Right. That's super cool. Well, Coach Jess, I do appreciate you coming on and getting to share your story. And for the listeners, you can actually go to rawthoughtspodcast.com, and all of his contact information will be underneath my guest links. Also, a reminder to, if you have any questions, any thoughts, your favorite podcast, there is a message link on there that you can shoot me a message. I would love to hear what you're taking away from these stories that are being shared, as well as heading over to Apple Podcast and leaving a review. So like I said earlier in the podcast, Spotify really has given me a lot of drive in the statistics and seeing how much it's growing. And it is all to my listeners and people like you. So thank you again for another episode. And thank you, Coach Jess, for coming on.
No problem. Thank you.
Absolutely. Bye, guys. Thank you for tuning into the show today. Your feedback is very important to me. If you could leave a review, as well as follow me on Instagram at rawthoughts.podcast and email in at m.rawthoughts@gmail.com if you have any guest suggestions.